Twitter and Instagram. We use the hashtag Ward8Dems, and we also use the hashtag Ward8, so you can join the discussion today. Well, we are here to have, I guess, we're here to have a safe space. We're here to talk about the results of the last election and to talk about what that means for us here in Ward 8 and here in the District of Columbia. As you know, we are still digesting those results from the 2024 election. But first and foremost, I just want to thank all Ward 8 voters who participated, whether they did that by mailing in their ballots or casting their votes at vote centers. We looked at the results. Over 57% of registered Ward 8 voters, that includes everybody, the entire universe, turned out among our registered voters. You turned out, you showed your powerful voices, and you are, in your own way, helping to shape the future of our ward and our city and our nation. We want to celebrate the Democratic wins that we had. Eleanor Holmes Norton, he was easily reelected to her seat as delegate. Ankit Jan for U.S. Senator. Oye Awolowo for U.S. Representative, also Ward 8 representative, Ward 8 resident here. Trayon White for Ward 8 Council, and Robert White for Council Member at Large. We look forward to collaborating with each of them to ensure that Ward 8 voices are heard loud and clear on critical issues such as education, housing, healthcare, and on our ongoing fight for statehood and autonomy. Now, while the outcome of the presidential race did not bring the victory that we had hoped for Vice President Kamala Harris, we honor her groundbreaking campaign and the inspiration that she provided to future young ladies and young men, perhaps right here in Ward 8. So we're proud of her. I am certainly proud of her as a member of Bison Nation. Fell short, but we're still proud of her campaign nevertheless. On Initiative 83, we respect the outcome, though it was not what we'd hoped for. The initiative brings questions about its implementation, funding, and the broader impact, especially with Congress's potential oversight. And we should be mindful that there is ongoing legal challenges around that initiative as well, that the DC Democratic Party is appealing, and we await a decision any day now. So we will continue to advocate for the values that align with our community's needs. We still do not believe that opening up our primaries to non-Democratic voters is a good fit for us here, despite what the results say. So stay tuned. That battle is not over, but we certainly respect the voice of Washingtonians who did weigh in on Initiative 83. We have to figure this thing out, and there's a lot of figuring out to do in the coming election cycles ahead. And then finally, I want to thank our dedicated volunteers, those who made phone calls, who sent text messages, who wrote letters, who did the postcards. I know I still have writer's cramp from writing postcards. And even those who traveled to other states, such as North Carolina and to Maryland, even Virginia. Of course, the Democratic Party, we adopted Pennsylvania. I certainly was there with many of you. And, we want to thank you because, if no one cares about what you did, we want you to know that we do, and especially those who live right here in Ward 8. So thank you. Your efforts are a testament to the strength and dedication that lives right here in our ward, that lives in all of you who care about democracy, who care about elections. And we all know that elections do have consequences. Now, as we reflect on this election season, let's remind ourselves that it is our shared values and vision that unite us, and it will fuel our work going forward. Together, we will rise stronger. With your support, we will continue to build a Democratic Party that we're proud of, that works for all of us, that champions the ideals of Ward 8, the District of Columbia, and the nation. So I want to stop there because we do have the chair of the DC Democratic Party with us, Charles Wilson is no stranger to us here in Ward 8. Ward 8 resident, of course, former president of Ward 8 Democrats. And he's here to share some of those, some thoughts about the election results. Welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, Troy, thanks so much. Good morning, Ward. It is, well, good afternoon, I should say. It's great to be with everybody virtually. Troy, I wish my background was as nice as yours.
Oh, yeah, it's nice here,
Fireplace
man.
background. Um, but yeah, there's a lot to talk about regarding this election. And I look forward to hearing from a lot of folks. The party was actually wanted to actually host a conversation about this. Um, on Thursday, and we had the flyer ready. We had already reached out to national panelists and pollsters to kind of talk about it. But once the election results came in, we kind of got the sentiment that folks just weren't ready to talk about it. Um, Meaning, folks were obviously very disappointed, and folks were upset at the same time, and the folks are still taking mental and emotional breaks um, just to kind of gather themselves over the next couple of weeks to kind of talk about where the party goes from here, and how do we get ready for 2 years from now for the midterms. So there's going to be a lot of conversations within the party about things that we've done well and areas where we have to improve. And like many of you, I've been reading a lot. I've been listening to a lot of the speakers on CNN and some of the other news networks about their opinions of what happened. But first, like Troy said, I want to really congratulate Kamala Harris and her campaign for really putting together an awesome campaign over 107 days against an opponent who was working on this for at least 4 years. Hats off to her and her team for what they were able to put together. I had an awesome convention. The excitement was there, but unfortunately, the votes didn't turn out the way we wanted. And one of the messages on our call on Thursday was, why did 6 million, 7 million people who voted last time, why did they choose to stay home this time? Um, why did they decide to stay on the couch and not cast their vote, either going to the polls or sending it through mail or early voting? That's a question that we have to ask and find out. Um, and if those 6 million people voted like they did 4 years ago, would the results have been different, not just on the presidential election, but to the down ballot races as well? Um, because we all, many of us knew there was going to be a nail biter for the presidential election, but I think many of us were surprised that we did not win back the House. And so all those conversations need to happen. I saw a woman who won a House seat on CNN the other night in a Trump district, by the way. She was a Democrat who won in a Trump district. And she said that the way they won, it was because they spoke to the needs of the voters in her community and not what the message coming from Washington, I mean the federal Washington. And she said in her community, fentanyl overdoses and deaths are a big issue, and her campaign spoke to that, and it resonated with those voters there. Um, so we all know the term all politics is local, and as a party, as a larger party, we have to get back to talking about local issues. And I strongly believe many of our state party leaders are doing that, but something just did not click, um, in this presidential election side. So we have to, like Troy said, we have to figure that out. So I look forward to being a part of that conversation and engaging the rest of the members of the Democratic Party in the national conversation and also in the local conversation. We as a party, I think it's healthy every 2 to 4 years, really sit down and kind of talk about what we do well as an organization, where we need to improve, and where there are opportunities to make additional progress. So I look forward to doing that with the members of our party, hopefully in December as we get ready for the new year. Um, and really set some tangible goals and how we're gonna and steps on how we're gonna reach those goals. So I encourage all of you to stay engaged with the Ward 8 Democrats and of course stay engaged with the DC Democratic Party and offer your opinion on where we kind of go from here. Thanks, Troy.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and I certainly understand that the gravity of where we are as a party is weighing on not just you, but the upper leaders of the party as well, and even residents here in Ward 8 and across the city. Um, Before you leave, I wonder, uh, do you have a word of advice to your fellow Democrats who might feel just disillusioned right now, who don't know what to do or where to turn because of the results of a week ago? What do you what have you said to yourself, to others who have reached out to you, and what do you say to those Democrats who might be having similar thoughts?
Yeah, I would say it is okay to feel the way you're feeling. And it's healthy to have conversations like this with other folks who are feeling the same way so we can be in therapy together. When I was when we were thinking about we were actually thinking about canceling our meeting because folks were just very angry, just mad and upset and didn't want to have it. And then as I started talking to people, they're like, yeah, you know what? It would be healthy to kind of talk to other folks who are feeling the same way I am. So we can you know, lament, but also re-energize ourselves and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to win everything, but there's an opportunity for us to bounce back quickly, actually, um, and just remind ourselves, and really get back to the conversation about who we are as a Democratic Party, what values are important to us. Um, what are our neighbors and our family members saying? I tell people the most accurate poll that I get or that I have access to is my mom and my family because they just, they'll often pull me to the side on, either at a family function or they'll call me and say, hey, tell that Democratic Party this or tell that Democratic Party that. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? And that's the most accurate poll. A lot of the feedback that I've heard nationally as far as why we weren't successful are the same reasons that I've heard from my mom and other family relatives that they might not say publicly on a microphone, but they'll whisper it to me. Um, and I always find those are the most accurate polls. But again, it's okay to feel the way we're feeling, but it's great to have conversations like this in Ward 8, around the city, in your own household, about how do we bounce back from this. And yeah, and it's like when you fall down, fall down on your back, but get back up and let's keep going. Um, and let's lean on each other's energies, ideas on how we improve the quality of life not only in Ward 8, but across the city and across the country as well. Because at the end of the day, it starts on our own block.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I know you mentioned, the most accurate poll or a poll that you really listen to is that of your family. And I recall a time when a cousin of mine reached out from what was called, I guess, a red state, and she said, there are a lot of signs down here that's not for your candidate. Like, I don't know if this is going to go your way. And I said, well, what do you think is missing? What's the what's the magic sauce that we're not quite pouring on this message? And she said, I just don't think we're talking about the one thing that matters most to people, and it is the economy.
Hmm.
And the other candidate talked a lot about that and what they want to do and how they want to crack down on what they felt were cheaters and so on and so forth. And we talked about that, but we also talked about a lot of other things too. And I think as a result of all the other things we talked about, very important things, by the way,
Hmm.
but because our message is so broad and we have an incredibly broad tent, big tent party, um, we were trying to reach so many different people in different places and spaces, whereas
Hmm.
the other team just spoke on one issue, maybe
Yeah,
two,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
maybe three.
Yeah.
But yeah, like one main issue.
Yeah.
And that was that it looks like, at least for some, it was a winning issue.
Yeah, like my sister-in-law, she lives in New York and she comes down every once in a while and she'll like, she'll hear me doing like these interviews and she'll after it's done, she's like gets really angry. She's like, I just don't understand the Democrats' immigration policy. I live in New York and all these people who've lived in New York for years and decades have been waiting for housing and waiting for an opportunity to get a hand up. And all of a sudden we have this open border policy that the Democrats uh, implemented and folks who aren't from here, not born and raised here, it's almost like they get to jump ahead of the line. And she was really angry about that.
We've heard that here
Um,
too.
yeah, really angry
Yeah.
about that. And very transparent about how she felt. And by and large, a lot of people felt that way. It was very angry about, whether it's, at the end of the day, the person who's in charge is going to get the blame, whether it's their fault or not. Um, and my sister-in-law spoke very plainly about that, about how she felt about that particular issue. Um, my mother, I got a praying mama. She's always up in church and always praying over me and calling me and said, the Lord told me to tell you, X, Y, and Z, and she's very upset about the Democrats' position on abortion. She doesn't believe in abortion. And she's like, is the Democratic Party just, you know, giving a blank check to abortion? And I was like, I don't think that's what it is, Mom. I think it's something different. And she's like, well, that's how I'm perceiving it. And she's very open about now she's not going to vote for Donald Trump at all, but that people thought that that was going to be an issue that would drive women to the blue side, and maybe not. Um, I don't know. I think those are deeper conversations that we have to have, and we'll see where we go from there. But again, like I said, the most accurate poll is not what I hear on CNN or on Twitter. It is literally from my own family. Um, um, and because they all have different views on politics. Um, and many of them are not politically passionate about Democrat or Republican. And I keep telling people just want to know if the government is going to work for them. Um, and they're not going to, throw on a Democratic Party hat and, go canvas or anything like that. They just want to make sure that the government is going to work for them. So those are just deeper conversations that we have to have, and we have to create a space where people are able to be honest and transparent about how they feel, even if they have a different opinion than you, and they're not going to get blasted on social media and shunned away. Um, and you think that you're changing their mind because you do that. They still will go into the polls and vote how they want it, how they vote, regardless of how you make them feel. And they might be even more upset about it. So we actually, that's another thing. I think we have to change the tone of politics, even in DC, about how we can respectfully disagree with each other on issues without trying to attack each other and tear each other down. I've seen campaigns where, you know, campaigns like really went to a candidate's personal life. And I just think that's off limits. And I think it really sets a tone where it's like, you know, campaigns have become more like the National Enquirer, like who can raise the most dirt on a on a candidate versus like what are the what values are they talking about? What is in their platform? Um, and get away from these personality politics.
Mr.
I think
Chairman,
I think it's a
I
challenge
think
for the
that's yeah, I hear you on that. I think those days are done. I love I love the idea of getting back to something that we used to do, but I mean, I think Donald Trump changed the game in
yeah,
terms of for one, the one thing he did, I think, to change the game was there's no more shame in whatever is in your background.
right,
So let that be let that be a call to action for anyone who thinks, well, I did this in my past, or,
yeah, yeah,
I may have done that, and I think I'm unqualified or disqualified from serving in public office. Well, not necessarily true. At this point, if you got good ideas, people will vote for you no matter
Yeah,
what.
yeah, that's true. I think he's shown that. So,
Yeah,
you
interesting
know,
stuff.
it might help that if you're a white man too, but you know, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, it's a whole other
Nationally,
conversation, but
nationally.
yeah, but it's certainly yeah, you're right about that because he did not have any coattails in say North Carolina, for example,
Hmm.
where the GOP Democratic governor nominee,
Hmm.
uh, I mean,
Yeah,
fared terribly
yeah,
against the Democratic nominee. Now, of course, there was a whole lot of messiness in his background, right? But I think what got him was, he thought he could be Trump, and
yeah.
as you said, there's only one Trump, right?
Only one.
And the same thing in Arizona with Kerry Lake, who
Yeah.
was running, and the guy who won, the Democratic who won, they at one point, and I know Marcus Batcher is here to speak to this. At one point, they were counting that guy out. They were like, "Yeah, he's not going to win at all. Like he has no shot." And he bested Kerry Lake, who everyone called Trump in heels.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're right. Maybe it's just a particular segment of our population that can get away with it. So that's a good point there. Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, for being here. If you're able to stick around and hear from our great panelists, we will certainly and weigh in some more if something else comes up. If not, we understand that you got to go. But thank you again for your insights.
No, thank you guys so much, and I look forward to the conversation. You got some smart people here, so.
Yeah, I think so. We know so. Thank you. I want to call up our Vice President, Sheila Bunn. She's our first Vice President here at the Ward 8 Democrats. Sheila is, no stranger to politics, both nationally and, of course, locally. And I know, Sheila, you and I, we've had a conversation about what does this mean, especially with Black women, because of just the heavy lift that Black women have done in the Democratic Party and politics in general. But to not see a return on that coalition that we've seen in the past has sort of shaken some Black women. I mean, I've seen some signs saying, memes and everything saying, "Hey, we're on break for now, maybe even forever." Certainly speak to that, but also just any comments you want to add.
Hey Troy, hey Warday, good to see you all. Um, Shaken is a mild word for it. Disrespected, counted out, not valued, are some of the words I think we as women, Black women, are feeling. The second time that we've been told no, first with Hillary Clinton, now with Kamala Harris. Just very disappointing and disheartening. And I think Black women, we've just taken this loss personally for all the work that we've done. And to think that twice we've had over super qualified candidates for presidency, and for America to say, hell no. Very disheartening. But I don't like to dwell on the negativity. Yes, these next 4 years I think will be challenging. We have a hint of what's to come, but we don't know what's coming. But I think we should hold on to, we've been through this before. We had 4 years of Trump. We had Reagan. We've had other Republican presidents. While Trump might be the worst, we are a surviving nation and we will get through this. And I think this is an opportunity for us as Democrats to really take an inward look and think about, like Charles said, our messaging and making sure that we are connecting at the local level, at the grassroots level, because that's where it really starts and that's where it really counts. You can have a huge national message, but if it doesn't trickle down and if it doesn't say to me as the voter how your policies are connecting to my pocket and to my lifestyle, it's no good. I think definitely this is an opportunity for us to regroup and to rethink and to get that messaging together, because I think that's where we really lost, was on messaging. We had a overqualified candidate who brought joy and love and decency back to this campaign, especially given the opponent that she was up against. But I think that we need to do some work on our messaging. And I think this is an opportunity to do that. And let's also remember 2 years from now, we'll be back at it again with congressional races. So this is, again, another time for us to get it together and try to turn things around. So I'm optimistic. Like Charles said, I had a praying grandmother, praying mother, and I'm a prayer. So I put no faith in man. God is still in control and he's going to get us through this. But as Democrats, we do have some work to do. So once we heal and grieve this loss, we got to pull ourselves together and get back to the drawing board and thinking about what these next 2 years are going to look like, strategizing towards the next election and even 4 years from now, because we really have to think about nationally in 4 years, who's our candidate? Who's out there being groomed? Who's getting that messaging together? So we got to start strategizing now. Again, grieve, get over this loss. But then let's start thinking about what's next. Even here in DC, with I-83, if that is implemented by the council, we need to think about what do our elections look like going forward? What education do we need to do of our residents about I-83? Yes, it passed overwhelmingly by 73%, but did people really understand what they were voting for? Whether you are for or against it, did people really understand what they voted for? So it's on us to make sure that if it does become reality, that we are out there educating our constituencies about what the electoral process in the district looks like. We have a mayoral election in 2 years. So we need to start thinking about those things and thinking about our messaging. Yes, Donald Trump is coming back with a vengeance, but we are a praying country, we are a fighting country, and we will survive and we will get ourselves together and get that messaging and our footwork together so that we can hold tight and turn things around. I'm proud to have been a part of working to elect Kamala Harris. Though she was not successful in this, I don't think this will be the last that we will hear from Madam Vice President. So Ward 8, DC, America, keep your head up. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, got you. Thank you for that. I wrote down something I heard you say, which was that heal and grieve, right? Like that is really, this is the start of that for us here in aid. But of course, there are conversations like this happening all over the country in communities like ours and others where people are saying what went wrong and how do we fix it, as we call just today's conversation. So what now, right? Like, where do we go from here? You also have a unique experience because you worked on the Hill. And so I wonder, we want to talk a little bit with our panel about what's happening on Congress, at least what will happen on Congress with the GOP takeover of the House and the Senate. Do you have any sense of if there's any way that what we can do, either as Democrats or as Ward 8 Democrats or Washingtonians, to stave off the worst that could be coming from those folks on the Hill?
I think we have to build coalitions, and I think we need to get out there and lobby and talk to all members across the aisle. I think that President-elect Trump is testing some of his Republican colleagues to see if they will really support some of his extreme picks. And we've heard rumblings that several of them are like, no, I'm not supporting that. So hopefully that is the case, that even some of his Republican colleagues won't fall for his shenanigans. So I think that we can't let up on pushing our message to them and trying to negotiate and collaborate with our colleagues. Marion Barry, our late former mayor, said something that that has always stuck with me. There are no permanent enemies in politics. no permanent enemies in politics. So we have to learn to work with Republicans, progressives, lefties, Democrats, everybody to get what we need here in the district. So I think this is an opportunity. Not all Republicans are extremists. And I think continuing to have those conversations and continuing to message our needs and our priorities to our Democratic colleagues as well as our Republican colleagues, I think is going to be important. And I also think that here in the district, we also need to make sure that we are talking to our independents, making sure that they understand what our priorities and goals are, so that while they may not choose a particular party, they choose the interests that best suit them.
Well said. Absolutely agree with that completely. Thank you. Thank you for that. We knew that there's so much wisdom in our ward and our party. And, I love it when we get to showcase that wisdom that we have on the Ward 8 Democrats. And so thank you for being here, of course. And thank you for sticking around for our panel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be here.
Thank you. So we asked people as they were registering for this event, we asked them to just let us know what they might be thinking, share some thoughts. And so here are a few of those. Some of them are, will the DC Democratic Party take a position on term limits? The pain is too acute. However, we need to begin the process of designing and implementing a new policy that is more inclusive. There's some thoughts on here about there's some thoughts here about when will a special election be held to replace Councilmember Trayon White? I should note that there is no special election planned or on the calendar because there isn't a vacancy in that role as of today. So as long as there's no vacancy, there will not be a special election. Other points here is we got to keep supporting our politicians. Okay. Time to move forward. What's next for DC? Yeah, we're going to ask that question actually. What does Project 2025 look like in DC? Oh man, yeah, absolutely. Someone said, I feel like I'm in purgatory. Project 2025 is going to deeply affect me. I am in the queer community. There's questions here about the right wing, how they will control the federal government. That's actually a really good point there in terms of jobs. We've heard a lot of hyperbole. Is it just rhetoric, or is it really going to happen? About moving at least 100,000 jobs, federal jobs, out of our region and into other places in the country. So how does that impact the DMV? Good question. We'll ask our panelists that. The Democratic talking points did not resonate. Yeah, sure. How is the Ward 8 Dems plan? I think they mean, what is the Ward 8 Dems plan to be more welcoming? I think this is the start of that right now, to have a conversation where everyone is invited. Everyone has always been invited to our conversation. But thanks for that question or that comment. Someone is asking about the Farm Bill and what that means for DC, especially with Republican control, of how this affects the fight to become a 51st state. We know it definitely will have some challenges around that. We also have questions here about House Republicans and Democratic districts. Yeah. And then I guess, implications for home rule is one. And then the last thing here is the people have spoken. Well, yeah, they have. And we respect the voice of the people, even though as we strategize and think about how do we rebuild and go from here, we will rise again, that's for sure. So I want to pause there. And I want to do a couple of things. I want to do a housekeeping job really quick with our treasurer's report and get that piece done. And then we're going to move swiftly to our council. To our committee. to our panel. Okay, you see, my head is all over the place. We're going to move swiftly to our panel discussion with Dr. Ravi Perry and Sam P.K. Collins from the Washington Informer. So, first and foremost, I want to bring up Daryl, who will approve our report. Daryl, you with us?
Yep. Good
Okay.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, pulling up the report now.
This is the October 2024 Treasurers Report. We opened with a balance of $18,508.25. We had revenue for the month of $140, expenses of $5.55. So the excess of the revenue over the expenses was $134.45. And so that gave us a end of the month of October balance of $18,642.70. At this time, if anyone has any questions about what you see, you can raise your hand or do the hand raise to speak, or put a question in the chat or the comments or the Q&A.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I am monitoring our chat as well as our Q&A to see if there's any questions on our budget. I will say that those are the numbers today. At the end of November, they look a lot different because that's what we did our spend down, of course, to support GOTV activities here in our ward. There is a comment, by the way, from Marcus Batchelor, Daryl, who says that the world keeps changing, but Daryl Ross is a constant comfort. The 1-8 Democrats. That's a good one. That's a good one.
I thank you for that. Only wish we could live forever, but
well,
I don't know. We'll all have our time.
We all have our time.
Just make the best of it while we're here.
Amen. Amen to that. All right. Well, I don't see, just making sure. Uh-oh. Okay. All right. I am not seeing any comments at this time with regard to, okay, hold on. Now I see people raising their hands. I just want to be clear. This is about our budget. So those of you who raised your hands, is this about our budget or is this about another issue? I'm going to suspect this is about another issue. Certainly invite you to use the chat. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Treasurer, will you move it?
Okay. I move that we accept the October 2024 Treasurer's Report for the Ward 8 Democrats, subject to audit.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Sheila Bunn. Further discussion? Further discussion here and none. All those in favor, vote aye. You can also use the chat.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposition or abstentions? All right. It's the opinion of the chair that the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
You're welcome.
And I would be remiss, I'm sure that Daryl would get on me if I didn't, but I want to just make sure that we always remind you that your dollars are very important here at the Ward 8 Democrats. You can vote, you can vote with your dollars just in your support of what we do here by donating. We take donations big and small. Maybe it's $5, 10, 25, 50, 500. you can certainly sow a seed in the Ward 8 Democrats. You can even say, hey, I want to sow this seed for a particular thing. And we can certainly work with you on that as well. We're always looking for sponsors. In fact, we have an event coming up next month for Kwanzaa. We're looking for sponsors for that. And so, and again, all donations will be helpful for us as we put on this annual community event that most people look forward to being a part of every year. You can scan the QR code right on your screen now. It'll take you right to our donation page at ActBlue, and you'll be asked to put in some information there if you haven't donated before using ActBlue. If you have, it's going to be real easy and simple, just a matter of seconds, in fact. But all of those dollars go toward helping us here at the Ward 8 Democrats. We sow that money back into the community through sponsorships, through GOTV activities, through voter education, through just Ward 8 education. You know, we need to talk about what we need to talk about so that everyone in our ward is informed about the issues that we care about. So again, we ask you to sow a seed. You can scan the QR code. If you prefer, you can go on our website at ward8dems.com. And at the top of the page, you can click on donate and it'll take you to the same space. All right. As we move toward our next conversation here, I want to tell you what we have coming up. This conversation doesn't end with us. We are one of the sponsors of the Ward 8, rather the DC Young Dems. They're having a conversation on next week on November 20th. It's going to be at the MLK Library up on the 4th floor. We're partnering with our friends, as you see across the party, the DC Latino Caucus, the Stonewall, Capital Stonewall, which is our LGBTQ Democrats. We're partnering with the DC Black Democrats, Ward 2 Democrats, Ward 6 Democrats, Ward 4 Democrats, and the DC Democratic Party. And so again, the young Democrats are having this conversation next week. And so if you are a young Democrat, you're 18 or will be 18 by the time the next election comes. I'm talking to you, Khalid. Then we invite you to come and be a part of this, 18 and up, of course. And if you're over the age of a young Democrat, let's say you are above 36, you can still come and be a part of this conversation next week. There's going to be a social hour before, and then afterwards, the discussion. And if you haven't been down to the new MLK Library, I mean, it's been open for a few years now since COVID. If you haven't been down there, it's a great excuse to go. It's a beautiful space, perhaps one of the most beautiful spaces in the city. So again, MLK Library next week, November 20th from 6 to 8. Come and support the DC Young Democrats as they continue this conversation that is happening here today. And then we want to invite Ward 8 Democrats who are interested in joining the DC Democratic Party. There's an opportunity for you to serve as an add-on member. We are looking for 6 women and 6 men. Add-on members bring all types of skills and abilities to the party. As you just heard from our chairman, we are in a rebuilding mode here. And so this is an opportunity, I think, to bring your skills. Say, hey, I have something unique. I have talents. I have a passion that I can bring to the party. This is your chance to do that. So if you're interested, and I'm talking really at this point to just Ward 8 Democrats, but if you're interested, we want to hear from you. Reach out to us, of course, but most importantly, we want you to go to this website, which is on your screen. Go ahead and screenshot this right now so that you can visit the site. It is not very long. It's you know what you have to fill out. It's a form there, intake form, just to let us know that you're interested. And when you do that, let us know that you applied so we can have a conversation. But we're looking again for 6 men, 6 women. They can come from anywhere in the District of Columbia. We're certainly looking to promote and to present Ward 8 residents who we believe could be a great benefit to the DC Democratic Party as we go forth and rebuild. and get our messaging where it needs to be. So again, add-on members, the application closes on Tuesday at end of business, so at 5 o'clock. So please get your application in. Tuesday, November 19th. 6 women, 6 men is what we're going to be looking for. You'll come and, of course, have opportunity to talk and meet with members of the party who will vote on your application, and that will happen in January. Okay, as we get ready to talk more about the results from last week, I want to just go over briefly what the results look like for Ward 8. And so for delegate to Congress, no surprise here, Eleanor Holmes Norton carried our ward with 83% of the vote. U.S. Representative Oyewolawa was reelected. He's also just so happens to be a Ward 8 resident. And so he also was reelected with 92% of the vote. And then Unkit Jan, actually, Unkit. He told me the way you say it is like uncle. So it's Unkit Jan. He won his seat for U.S. Senator. Now, the U.S. Representative and the U.S. Senator seats, these are shadow Senate and representative seats. And what they do is they advocate for D.C. statehood. What I appreciate most about Oyewolawa is that while he is there advocating for D.C. statehood, he talks about other issues as well that are important to those of us here at Ward 8, but also across the city. He talks about, record expungement, especially around marijuana convictions, and he talks about grants and all those other type of things. He's really he's been a fantastic U.S. representative, because not only is he there fighting for D.C. statehood, and he brings that issue up wherever he goes, but he is also there as a representative of the people. And so if you haven't really been following him, again, he's a Ward 8 resident. If you haven't been following him, former ANC commissioner here in Ward 8 as well, if you've been following him, get to know Democrat U.S. Shadow Representative Oyewolawa. And then I also want to mention Unkit Jan. I have seen him in Ward 8 more times than I've seen him elsewhere. I mean, he's been in our ward. He's been putting up signs, talking to voters. And I just want to give him a shout out, because he has done the work. And so we hope to see more of him in Ward 8. No swipe to the previous U.S. shadow senators, but I think I've seen Unkit in our ward more than I've seen the other ones. So hopefully that continues well after Election Day. For DC Council, we had 2 options there. Democrat Robert White won handedly re-election with 72% of the vote. Christina Henderson, who is the independent, she came in second with 15% here in our ward. And then the Ward 8 member of the council race, those seats, of course, it was a race against Democratic incumbent Trayon White Sr. against Republican Nate Durange. And then there were some write-ins as well. As you can see here, Councilmember White was reelected overwhelmingly as well with 76% of the vote. And so he will be returning to the council. And then while these positions are not technically partisan, they are, the members who ran actually are Democrats and have been even a part of the Ward 8 Democrats. And so we just want to celebrate these wins as well. And so at-large member of the State Board of Education, Jacques Patterson, former ANC commissioner, former president of the Ward 8 Democrats, he actually cleared the field. And so he won with nearly 98% of the vote there. And then also Ward 8 member of the State Board of Education, LaJoy Johnson Law. We are just so proud of her. Not only did she clear the field with 98% of the vote as well, but 4 years ago she ran and she finished in a distant third. And here we are 4 years later, and there's no one that stood a chance against her because she stayed active, she stayed engaged in the work. LaJoy would be the first mother on the State Board of Education since Linda Moody, who also was from Ward 8, over 30 years ago. And so we are just proud of her and proud of her accomplishment. And so LaJoy Johnson Law, everybody, get to know her if you don't already. She is returning, she's going to be our new Ward 8 member on the State Board of Education. And then just because we like to look at the results before and now, we had 57% of all registered voters here in Ward 8 show up at the polls this year. 4 years ago, it was 54%, or really 55%. So we sort of did 2% better. The registered voters have also shifted because the Board of Elections has cleaned up the voter roll, which had needed a scrubbing. And so I think the results are better reflective of the actual voter roll here. And so we did better than we did 4 years ago. We still want to get in those higher numbers. Some of our other wards are, near 70%. And we certainly want to continue to do that work to get there. And I should also note that this is everybody. So these are Republicans, Democrats, and independents in this number. All right, just some quick photos from our many adventures here in Ward 8 supporting Kamala Harris. As you know, she was not victorious, but we are so proud of her and the work that she did. I want to just give a special shout out to Barbara Jones. If you're looking at the top portion of the screen here, she is the woman with the Kamala Harris for the People shirt there. Barbara Jones is a longtime Ward 8 resident, longtime Ward 8 Democrat. She is our events chair. She helped to really plan and execute. She worked with the campaigns to put on these events. They were held at Bus Boys. And we even had a watch party that she held down for us as well on election night. And so we just want to give a shout out to Barbara Jones. If you know her, if you see her in the streets, make sure you say, hey, Barbara, Ward 8 Democrats love you. We heard them talking about you. Let her know that she's loved and adored for all the work that she's done. And then lastly, we're looking for you. There's always a place for you to serve here at the Ward 8 Democrats. As you heard earlier, the whole party is in a rebuilding mode. And so are we here in Ward 8. There are lots of ways that you can serve and be a part of our efforts here. Programming, issues in legislative affairs, seniors, membership, public relations, fundraising, very, very important piece around fundraising and development. We also are looking for members to be a part of our youth engagement committee, special events, canvassers, or just plain organizational volunteers. We're powered by our volunteers. We need our volunteers. We are all volunteers. And so if you have a passion, or if you have a particular interest or a skill that you think that the Ward 8 Democrats can benefit from, we would love to hear from you. Please send us an email with your bio or your resume to info@ward8dems.com. Again, that's info@ward8dems.com. All right, so I want to get to our panel discussion now. I'm going to introduce who is with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. All right. I'll pull it up in here instead. All right, so with the 2024 general election behind us, many of us are still grappling with the results. Some may feel hope, while others may feel disillusion. Whatever the outcome means to you, please remember that you're not alone. This is a safe space where we can lament, where we can strategize, where we can grieve and heal, as we heard from our Vice President Sheila Bunn earlier. But most importantly, we will get back to work on the issues and the values that we care about. Frederick Douglass said that without struggle, there is no progress. And we know struggle here in Ward 8, right? And we've also known progress, and we will continue to see progress, I believe, despite whatever the outcomes were from the election. I also know that some of you are struggling, and perhaps it's your mental health. And so if you need additional supports, I want you to reach out, whether it's to a friend or it's a family or a loved one, or reach out to a mental health specialist. We do have a lot of resources here in our ward, but I want to make sure that you're good. Okay. So if you are still anxious or you're having some really, weird thoughts about just where we're going from here, I want you to reach out to somebody. Okay. I want to also say that, listen, this is just a temporary feeling that we're having right now. There was a pastor years ago who said, this is when we were having a recession back in 2009. And he said, I reached out and I talked to the collard greens and I talked to the sweet potatoes. And I was telling them, hey, you know about this recession, about, this anxiety that we're feeling. And he said, you know what they said back? They said, no, I don't know anything about a recession. I'm just sitting here being a sweet potato. I'm sitting here just being collard greens, like we are programmed to do what we're here to do. And it's like, he was trying to make the point that it really is an emotion that we're feeling, but we can power through it. And so Michael Beckwith was his name. If you are familiar with him, check him out. What he said that day was pretty interesting. So perhaps the candidate you supported was victorious, or maybe they didn't win. The impact of this presidential race and the shift in congressional leadership may be felt here in the district for years to come. Our focus today is on answering what's next. We'll look at the 2024 election results and discuss the path forward for Ward 8, DC, and the nation. We'll look at a couple of things. We'll look at what voting patterns emerged within Ward 8 and across the city. We'll also look at the outcomes of the presidential race and the Republican-controlled Congress and how that will affect policy and legislation and governance here in the District of Columbia going forward. And the broader implications what this could hold for our national and political landscape. So joining us for this discussion is Dr. Ravi Perry. He is a professor of political science at Howard University. He's an expert on Black politics, minority representation, and urban politics, and American public policy. He is also the vice chair of the board of directors for DC Vote, which advocates for DC statehood. And then Sam Collins is a reporter for the Washington Informer. He covers Ward 7 and 8, as well as City Hall. And so we certainly want to thank both of you gentlemen for being here and being a part of our discussion today. First of all, how you doing? And did you hear anything from our previous panelists, our previous guests that gives you hope or frightens you going forward? We can start with you, Dr. Perry.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I share the sentiments of varied consternation that we seem to have about where we go next. I think certainly the Democratic Party needs to not just do a listening tour, but do a cleaning house tour in many ways. And Democrats, would do better to be more honest about how we differentiate between what we allege a candidate says versus what our media influences tell us that candidate says.
Well, that's a good cue up there to you, Sam, because I know that you're in the media. And if you want to share some thoughts about what you just heard from Dr. Perry, that'd be great as well.
No doubt. I think overall, in regards to what Dr. Perry said, and peace and blessings to you, long time, as well as what other folks said earlier, it's seeming that the Democratic Party locally and nationally is sort of recalibrating and just making sense of what happened. I would say over the last 16 years and maybe even the last 8, there's been changes in demographics. And even when you talk about locally within the Democratic Party, there's a spectrum of philosophies and political viewpoints within that party. So people are more conservative than others, and people might be more quote unquote progressive, whatever that means to you. So as far as what Dr. Perry said, and as far as what others have said, um, what the next 4 years, from what I'm seeing, what the next 4 years will require is for the Democratic Party to have what they call the come to Jesus moment about principles and about what many consider a misalignment with the working class. And even internationally, people who identify with Palestinians and other marginalized populations. So, you know, with DC being majority Democrat, oftentimes we overlook how the connection to the national party hinders progress, uh, especially when it comes to activists who I come across in the Wilson building and people from, you know, marginalized populations. So it's a multifaceted issue, but I think it comes down to class, and it definitely comes down to whether more people vote or more people register as Democrats in the next 4 years. I yield.
Excellent points there. By the way, I'm taking notes because I'm always learning. So I appreciate what you said there. Dr. Perry, I want to go back to you. First of all, you mentioned something I thought was pretty interesting, and that was that the DC Democratic Party, I'm sorry, the Democratic Party, not just DC, but the Democratic Party in general, should not just be on a listening tour, but they need to actually clean house. Can you expand on that a bit? What do you mean when you say clean house? What needs to go?
Well, I'm from Ohio, so so as a native of Ohio, I lived in DC now for 6 years. Um, I understand democratic politics differently than, frankly, those folks who are from the East and West Coast. The East and West Coast obscures the average American voter. The average American voter is more like a Midwesterner than someone from DC, LA, Miami, or New York. And any party that focuses on the agenda items of what I call coastal cities is doomed to fail versus the agenda items of landlocked cities. And we have continually had that error in terms of some of the conservative arguments of they talk about this as identity politics, or the white male voter, or the white uneducated voter. And I hail from that part of the country. So my hometown, Toledo, Ohio, every Jeep Wrangler you see in the road was made in my hometown. Every scale you've ever stepped on was probably made, the patent for it came from Toledo. The glass you drank out of last night or this morning was probably made out of Libby glass in Ohio. Why do I say that? It's because, up in, Ohio also used to be, by the way, a bellwether state, and where, everyone, including, Hillary, thank you, Ohio, right? You had to go through Ohio to win. It's no longer that way, in part because the Democratic Party has done a very poor job of getting to the voters whose sentiments then Trump picked up. So Trump picked up these sentiments of these disillusioned, disaffected white voters who have a patchy history in political voter participation. So you can't really track them in polls. So that makes polling all pretty much a guessing game now, because it's messed up now really by a function of a whole bunch of things, whether or not you choose to answer the text or your phone, your cell phone, or whether or not you still have a landline, and all those kinds of challenges. But I think the cleaning house part is important because we have we've had one Black DNC chair temporarily in Donna Brazil, and then recently with Jamie Harrison. And both of these folks are from the South. So, Don Brazil's from Louisiana, Harrison's from South Carolina. And I think, while that's important, because there's significant Black voters in the South, the idea that the Black voice in the Democratic Party need come from The South, I think, is a challenge for folks who live outside of the South, who are also part of the Democratic Party, and who view the South in a particular, perhaps negative way, as unfair as that may be. But I think the challenge there is that what you have in the DNC are a bunch of resources being devoted to sending candidates to places where the likelihood of you being able to generate some significant voter change is just simply not happening. And so what we see then is a bunch of great rallies, which are scripted events, glorified event planning with amazing kinds of, contributions and people. But, the real question is, what's the voter, turnout numbers, what are the door knock numbers? And I think we've seen some improvement there, so I don't want to criticize the party too much in that regard, but it just simply hasn't been consistent. And again, I look at my home area, like in the Midwest, where the Democratic Party should have won Michigan, should have won Wisconsin, should have won Pennsylvania, particularly when we know that's exactly the 77,000 votes that were lost between Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Detroit in 2016 for Hillary Clinton. So it should have been obvious that we needed to be there and to do all we could to pull out the stops in those communities. And we just didn't on the ground. I think we did a lot of high level attention grabbing events. And then my last comment I'll say is the other thing about cleaning house is we have to find a way to marry a message that meets the new generation of voters and older generation of voters. And what that means is we do still have to tiptoe dance around race. Black Americans need to remember that we are still 13% of the American population. And so what that should mean for us is that anything that Black folks want will likely need to have the support of a coalition of whites in Congress to do it. We celebrate the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act. Those are all acts passed by 99% white folks in Congress. And so we just need to be reminded that our message, therefore, as we embrace minority communities like me, I'm Black, I'm gay, etc., as we speak to those communities, we also can't, in speaking to them, turn off other parts of our big tent party voter base that we need in order to actually win.
I appreciate that. You were mentioning about the party chairs and who they've been, at least the two Black party chairs that we've had since the inception of the Democratic Party. There is a comment here that says we need someone like a Stacey Adams, so another Black person to become our party chair because because of the work that she's done, say in the South, for example. Very quickly, do you think like Stacey Adams would be a good addition to the party, or are you thinking just again understanding that we are, as you said, really only 13% of the country, that we ought to be building again broader coalitions?
Well, Stacey Abrams, by the way, and she is currently at Howard University, as a fellow, and so y'all can certainly check out her opportunities at Howard, where she's at Howard almost monthly for often public events. If you want to go see Stacey Abrams, former House Minority Leader in Georgia, gubernatorial candidate in Georgia, leader of Fair Count, and which really helped create the Senate majority that we had in electing Ossoff and Senator Warnock in Georgia. So she has the cachet to pull out votes. The question I still have to put, though, is that, and I respect Miss Abrams very, very well, but I just don't know this about her. So I will have to, chat more and learn more about her. But I'm not so sure how well she stacks up nationwide in terms of her image, frankly, and also in terms of her know-how of how you get out the votes in Georgia, which is mostly rural, plus Atlanta and Savannah. Kind of, no offense to Macon and Valdosta folks, but there is much of the rest of the country is less rural and more suburban in some places, and very urban in other places. And so I'm just not so sure, but I do think we need a rotation of candidates exactly like Stacey Abrams who have the skill set, who represent communities that have been historically disadvantaged in these leadership roles, and who isn't necessarily a party insider. And so I think that is important. I've heard on the outset, like people like Rahm Emanuel might want to take over, and that would be just disastrous for all kinds of reasons. One, just because, his likability factor is kind of low. And beyond
Yeah,
that, he's another white guy, kind of in this role. He's white ethnic, but still, white in the eyes of many. And so I
yeah,
think that we can, in fact, get to a newer candidate, but I'd imagine why not go even younger? Why do we have to
hmm
go for the folks who are, I'm 42, for the folks 40s and older? Why not find a Democratic, DNC chair that might be in their 20s or 30s? If they can, be elected to office at 25 state legislatures, 35 for president, then they should be able to run a party. And I think we
yeah,
have
fair.
some good examples of young party leaders uh,
Yeah,
in some states.
I think
Or
I
we
think
also
that's a
might do a team. Why do we need a chair? Maybe we do a council of chairs so
yeah,
we
we
don't
the
lose
the
relationship.
GOP had two chairs, for example, this past election cycle. So that's actually a good point as well. Sam, I want to bring you in here. I know as a journalist, and I know you've covered this already, in your reporting. I'm curious if you will just sort of expand on your reporting a bit for our audience here about the conversations that you've been having with Washingtonians about the election in terms of what are they thinking, what are their feelings in terms of what's next. And I guess I'm really specifically thinking about the coming trifecta, right, with the White House and both chambers of Congress being controlled by the GOP. What are you hearing regarding that and people's thought around home rule and autonomy?
Very great question. Well, we are observing 50 years of home rule.
Yeah, right.
We have current and former mayors, council members, attorney generals coming together for a photo on Tuesday. So, when you talk about that, that brings that to mind for me. In regards to voters' fears and apprehensions and just anxieties, I've heard, with the probable attempt on the part of the Trump administration to take out the education department. And that's been a very, very big concern, especially for families whose children are special needs and people who are looking to go to college. So with the education department controlling Pell Grants, that's definitely been a very, very big concern. And as far as home rule is concerned, that was actually a concern leading up to the election. We had Michael Brown Jr., not Michael Brown, Ron Brown's son, forgive me, who ran trying to counter, of course, the winner, saying that she couldn't stand up to Republicans on the Hill. But in regards to what's coming up, we do have the Bowser Act that is currently in Congress that is going to repeal home rule if it is passed. And with the trifecta, and with Trump having the trifecta, and with the Republican stronghold in Congress, it is likelier that we will see a Republican assault on home rule, but Mayor Bowser at the very same time does not seem very concerned about that. And she said just as much on Tuesday when she talked about engaging Republicans and engaging Donald Trump. Her main concerns as it relates to DC and the White House are federal jobs and downtown revitalization. So, with the downtown buildings being vacant during the pandemic, Mayor Bowser has articulated a vision around making downtown more multifaceted with residences and different activation stations for people to do things now that people aren't really working down there. But at the very same time, she is very concerned about the federal workforce. But she did say, this is my last point, she did say that's more of a regional obligation. So she's calling on her regional partners in Maryland and Virginia to handle that. So sort of a roundabout answer, but that's what we're looking at as it relates to the Republicans.
Yeah, I actually I listened in to the mayor's press conference. I know you were up front asking questions, and so thank you for holding our elected officials accountable. Staying with you here, you mentioned City Hall, which we call, well, I'm old school. We call it the district building, but I know it's the Wilson building.
Yes, sir.
But what else are you hearing in the council chambers there, uh, just about what their anxieties are around, January, in terms of, because I mean, the council is our legislative body here. They pass laws that, supposedly represent the will of the people. And so with Congress saying, hey, we're going to upend everything you really do here, I'm sure there's some thoughts that folks have at least been sharing, even on back channel.
So budget season, would be coming up directly after the inauguration. There's a bit of concern around whether Congress would approve the budget or even any other kind of legislation that DC is dealing with. We know when it comes to marijuana, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to education, and even when it comes to public safety, Congress is very, very articulate about what they want to do with that as far as controlling legislation. So there are council members who are very concerned about that. And you also have to look at reparations. With the funding of the commission, there is still some concern that down the line, there may be some anxiety about that congressionally. So as far as the issues, that's basically what council members are talking about, some council members at least. But a lot of the issues as of late have been more local. I know we're talking about truancy and ERAP, with the council members, but when it comes to federal engagement, it's basically about whether laws can get approved, seeing as though DC still has to send bills up on the Hill.
You're on mute, Troy.
You would think I would know by now. Thank you. Are you also hearing, because I've heard from some people, and I'm just want to be very transparent, that there is this idea of overturning red light cameras and cameras in general in the District of Columbia, that some people are like, yay, let's do that, even though we don't want congressional interference. I think we've heard some members of the Hill, particularly GOP people, say that, that it's become more excessive in the District of Columbia and that they may take action. That's just one example, but have you heard about a major fear that the GOP, that the council members, even the mayor, may have about GOP returning to power in full power, to say, on the Hill?
As far as fears, not necessarily. The game plan in talking with the mayor and in talking with council members is just engaging Congress and extending not an olive branch necessarily, but just coexisting with them and doing their best to advocate for themselves up on the Hill. This has particularly been a focus of the mayor, who wants to use government agencies and actually wants to implement what she calls another, she told us that she had either orientations or dinners or banquets, some things of that nature for new congressional members in years past, and she plans to do that again. So, this is part of the game plan. As far as anxiety, there's not really any. I'm not going to say there's not any, but what I've seen is more so disappointment in the results. And with the first Trump presidency having already passed by, there are already some expectations. So it's not as though people are, too unfamiliar with what he can do. At this point, it's more so about just using what resources at hand to stem off any kind of changes.
Got it. Dr. Perry, so I mentioned earlier that you are a professor at Howard University. I'm a graduate of Howard University, so you're part of the Howard University family. And one of the things that came up was that the vice president obviously is a product of Howard. And so I imagine that, you've had a lot of conversation with students at Howard about, the outcome and certainly some of them may have shared that they're disillusioned. You mentioned previously that we need to start looking younger in terms of maybe a party leader. And so I'm curious, two things. One, what have you said to your fellow students there, maybe even colleagues at Howard, as they were digesting the election results? What did you tell them in terms of keeping the faith, if you will? And then how do we engage young people, who may feel disillusioned? What are your ideas around that?
So I'm gonna get to that. I wanted to piggyback on that last question for a second on statehood. There are some things that DC Politico seem to be unwilling to talk about that we can and should be doing in terms of statehood. First, I think we need to ask ourselves who actually is leading statehood in Washington, D.C. As a policy initiative. DC Democrats do statehood, 51 does statehood, DC Vote does statehood, the mayor's office claims they do statehood. Someone has to own the issue as a legislative matter. And that hasn't happened, frankly. So I'll just put up my complaint hat as a transplant. In the 6 years I've been here, I haven't seen it. And so for those who have longer histories, they may talk about the statehood, a bill, the statehood resolution that was passed 10 years ago, et cetera, all that. And that's lovely if you are a native Washingtonian and you have the fortune to be here forever. For those of us who have moved more recently, and which is, I would say, probably about a third of the voting population now, we haven't had much conversation about what actually statehood means. What is in that Constitution? Did we actually ever do a delegate count to actually, every other state that has been admitted by Congress has been admitted by Congress after the state held a delegate convention where the elected delegates chose for themselves to, in fact, be put up for statehood admission. We haven't done that in Washington, D.C. So even if we had a trifecta.
We've had a constitutional convention, though, Dr. Perry.
But they weren't elected delegates, is the point I'm making. And the reason for that is because council has insisted that they are the elected delegates because they are council representatives. But all I'm saying is that we would be asking for another exception. Folks don't believe me, go look up what the Congressional Research Service has said about the novelty of the request for DC statehood. It's not just the conservative and the liberal points of whether or not there's constitutionality or whether or not it can be admitted by congressional vote. It's actually slightly more complicated. If Democrats had won, we could have theoretically had a bill passed on January 21st for statehood. We would not have been able to implement it because we don't have an updated review, I would argue, what happens to judges, what happens to, we know the mayor becomes a governor, but what happens to ANC chairs? What happens to ward chairs, et cetera? And that level of conversation, if it has happened, what I'm encouraging is that it needs to happen again. A lot of time has gone by. A lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people live in DC now who aren't part of that 50-year home rule legacy, who are central and actually to vote. As one of the sad ironies of statehood is that as DC's become less Black, statehood has become more likely. And I just want to say that again. So as DC's become less Black, statehood has become more likely. And there's an important reason for that, because when statehood, if statehood continues to be an issue about Blackness, which it is for many of us as a pride, but for the other side, that's the reason to be against it. And so I'm just suggesting for folks that we need to have a clear agenda on statehood. What we have done a DC Vote is that we view ourselves as the kind of interlocutors of folk who build coalitions and bring coalitional partners together to move the needle forward. But there are certain legislative things that we cannot do that either council has to decide or the voters of DC have to decide by us doing another referendum. I volunteered to host at Howard a convening on statehood. that brings together all the everybody's, not just our local leaders, but they're national people who have interest in statehood and national organizations, not even based here in Washington, D.C., some in New York, some in L.A., lawyers, and all kinds of folks that will be necessary to help us get the issue. I think we've spent too much time talking about statehood as a kind of a political reality in terms of a campaign, and not so much on the nuts and bolts on the governing side of what would actually happen. And frankly, again, now I think the Constitution just needs to be revisited again. Like one minor thing that we know, for example, is that right now the current bill that Congresswoman Holmes Norton's office put forward, lists Washington twice. So technically, if it were to pass as the bill says right now, we would be Washington, Washington, Douglas, Douglas Commonwealth, right? And that is, it's minor, but my point is that if we are unwilling to change how we approach statehood, and I think it's possible we might be able to get it in correlation with Republicans. They view DC as Democratic, well, then maybe, get Puerto Rico or Northern Mariana Islands or Guam in the conversation, all groups of folks who are also majority minority communities who are disenfranchised with the lack of congressional vote, U.S. Virgin Islands as well. So sorry to go on that, but I thought it's an important conversation because I'm about to step down as vice chair of DC Vote because my term is up next month. So I'll have a little bit more time on my hands. But I want to, certainly emphasize that statehood is central. We would get about $1.8 billion in additional revenue, according to DC Fiscal Policy Institute. We'll have about another $1 billion in costs and expenses. But what a new state legislature would do with that money, no one's talked about. Right. And so it's all this. And if you go around my neighborhood here in Marshall Heights, you talk about statehood, people, it's the last thing on people's mind. Folks are worried about the fact that there's no food at the corner, that gas is too high down the street, et cetera. And so it's a real issue. And I would just want to end on a positive note that, I'll be glad to work with folks to build a local and national conference, so to speak, symposium, whatever you want to call it, on statehood that brings all these voices together so that if we do get the trifecta in 2026, or we do somehow get some movement with Republicans, we're actually ready to do the implementation part of it. And my argument is we haven't. One of a colleague of mine at Howard, who's also on the DC Vote Board, I put an article he wrote a couple years ago in the Washington Post in the chat that highlights some of this issue. There are some basic technicalities that need to be fixed that no one's talking about. And some of suggestively that council is kind of in the way. In the one hand, an Arab council suggests that, they would be, in fact, the automatic elected delegates because they are the elected council members. But, that's kind of speaking for the people as opposed to letting these people speak for themselves. And so that's kind of a problem there. And either way, it's possible that we could get statehood without having an elected delegate convention, but it just never has happened. And
I mean, you know that they've been trying to do it through the, forcing a filibuster change and through the Congress. But of course, the Democrats no longer control Congress fully, and certainly won't after January. I want to bring in Sheila Bunn. She I think has a comment here. And then also there was a correction that there were three Black chairs of the DC. I'm sorry, of the Republic, the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. Ron Brown, I think, was the very first one elected back in 1989, and there's a school named after him here in the district as well. Sheila, welcome back.
Thank you, Troy. Just wanted to piggyback on Sam's comment about what the council is worried about. Not too many people are talking about it, but the 11 judicial vacancies that we have here in the district that is a concern for the council. And I think within the next month or so, there may be 2 additional ones. So there will be 13 vacancies on our courts that pertain to the district, which is a problem for us, especially when we talk about public safety. So just wanted to throw that in the mix as a concern that the council is looking at as well. I think there's a letter that's forthcoming to our Congress members about those particular vacancies and the urgency in getting those filled. So just wanted to share that.
Thanks for that. And I heard that, you know, we only have but so many legislative days left in this Congress. And as you said, there are vacancies on the DC circuit, but there's also vacancies across the country. And so Senate needs to get to work, you know, stay until it's done, because we know that for the next 4 years, you know, the next president will be just carte blanche, getting everyone in. Some of these folks have very questionable law backgrounds or just commitments to the community. So,
and even looking at our higher
yeah.
court, Supreme Court nominations, there are a couple that Trump might be able to make.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah. There's
definitely.
already talk, I think, about a couple of them retiring to allow him to appoint someone who's a lot younger than them. So yeah, it wasn't just about pocketbook issues, I know, but for some people, that's what they voted on, and those issues were real to them. You know, the other things were more external; they were more pie in the sky. But for those of us who think about the impact of the Supreme Court and our courts, our judicial system, even everything from trade. I mean, my goodness, you know, tariffs. Yeah. Thank you for that, Sheila.
Well,
I do
also a
want
state issue.
to just 1 second, sir. I do want to just say that as we are rounding the last part of the clock here, there were a few questions, and certainly, Dr. Perry, I'll let you speak on whatever it was you were about to say, but I just wanted to acknowledge that there were some comments, a very active chat going on. So if you are joining us here on Zoom, you will see that. For those of you who are watching the stream later, we'll try to share some of those in the comments that you'll see later. But we did want to, there was a question that came up, and I think we answered it. There was a question from Gilda that talked about, will the election results have an impact on the quest for home rule? And I think Dr. Perry and you, Sam, you both talked about that. Go ahead, Dr. Perry.
I just wanted to add that the judicial stuff is important for statehood as well. The reason why I made the point I was making is that even if we had a Democrat trifecta, even if a bill was passed, even if it was signed by the president, we already know they would go immediately to the Supreme Court before any implementation. And so the question will be, what statehood bill can we redraft at the council level or in Holmes Norton's office now in anticipation perhaps of a better 2026 midterm cycle that would actually pass a conservative review in terms of judicial review at the Supreme Court level. I actually don't think what we currently have in our implementation documents would pass that judicial scrutiny for the simple fact that, one, they already don't like the fact that some of them claim that it's unconstitutional. So if we're going to assume that they're going to move that to the side, they're at very least then going to have to accept an argument that says that, well, they were admitted by like any other state. But if we have that asterisk that says, oh, well, but the people, you know, who wrote the Constitution were government lawyers, as I know, as Marcus Batchelor was writing, or someone, you know, and not the people, and the people who decided it weren't elected delegates like all the other states, then it gives them an out. And for us to give them an out would be shooting ourselves in the foot. And so I did want to mention, though, quickly about the Howard question. Howard is, you know, we're here. You know, we were here before this election. We will be here after this election. Students are, of course, despondent. Faculty, in some cases, as well. You know, she is a native daughter, not only of Howard, but of political science, a department that I used to run for 4 years, and an economics degree as well in 1986. And so, her watch party was full of anticipation. her speech afterward, where she of course conceded the election, was a very somber, sad moment. But it was really lovely to see all of the international and national media groups on Howard's campus. The exposure for Howard, the visibility for our brilliant students. We're about to become a Carnegie Research One, very high research activity university again, which will be central to us providing everything to community grants to additional research services for faculty like me to actually get some of our stuff done. And, so we're looking forward to that. But, it is unfortunate. But I also would say that the reason why it's unfortunate is because if you paid attention to Trump in the past couple of days, his video he came out about education makes it clear that he wants to cut money in two areas that's central to Howard. One, he wants to cut money in infectious diseases to only focus on chronic diseases, which that should be clear to anybody what that in fact means. Howard Hospital receives a lot of dollars and support for the significant work that we do improving the infectious disease health of mostly, by the way, DC low-income residents, not of our faculty, staff, or employees. And so for that funding to go away, that would mean health problems here in the District of Columbia. But also, last point is that, if Trump was to follow through on these initiatives, he has said that he wants to end any form of race-based education, which could mean lack of funding for some HBCU initiatives. I don't think he will cut it entirely. I think there's too much conservative interest in HBCUs for that to happen. But the fact that he is more interested in giving white folks dollars for their alleged grievances because of reverse discrimination, and not focusing on Black dollars or Native American dollars or other folks who are owed reparations, I think is a challenge. And so I think what I want to encourage us to do, because I like to talk about solutions, is that the Black community, I think, has focused on reparations, I think a bit too narrowly, and racial equity on the other side. I've done research on target universalism. So has other folks like John Powell at Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. But it's a different way of getting racial stuff done in white spaces without losing white support. And I think reparations, just like CRT and DEI and affirmative action, has now become such a pariah, and woke even as well, that, the Republicans have done a good job of taking these terms and getting the media to talk about them in ways that are antithetical to how we initially introduced them. And then they take a life of their own and then go turn back and hurt us.
Yeah. Yeah, we've certainly seen that. And I love that you mentioned some of those resources there that people can check out, especially research. And Dr. Perry, I mean, you said a lot there. We don't have time to unpack it all, but I tell you, I think people of color are in for a rude awakening. And marginalized communities are in for a rude awakening. And so it is not the time to retreat. I know we led at the top of our program about how, Black women were like, listen, we did what we were asked to do. Everyone else sort of let us down, not everyone, but others let us down. And I know it feels innate to just retreat from, the movement work that must continue, but it's about to get a lot tougher. If even a fraction of what Project 2025 is implemented, it's going to really be felt by marginalized people the hardest.
If I may.
But I love what you're saying about coalition building and continuing to do that work, because that's important. Yes, please, Sam, hop in. Also wanted to get your thoughts on Initiative 83 before we close out.
All right, no problem. I think both points can be tied. The point I wanted to make was that Project 2025, unbeknownst to a lot of people, I'm pretty sure y'all know about it. it has its origins in the Reagan administration. So the Heritage Foundation, those heads and the people who came before them, they were inspired as going back far as the Reagan administration and just implementing some of those elements. But in speaking about Initiative 83, I know one main concern in my reporting that I addressed was the outside intrusion, as far as the funds and as far as people from out of town who set roots in DC collaborating with the DC natives around this. And there has been confirmation around that. While I acknowledge that concern, I would also posit that that the landscape in the years leading up to I-83 sort of set the stage for that. The discontent among DC residents about their economic conditions under Democratic leadership has sort of set that foundation. So there are people who are coming in, and not to say that, you know, whether it's valid or not what they are working toward, but they are just addressing the conditions that, you know, many people address day in and day out at the Wilson Building and what people are feeling. So when people feel like they don't have much of a choice in their leadership, or their leadership isn't acting the way that they want it to be, then of course they would be attracted to things like Initiative 83. In terms of the get out the vote efforts, I know in Ward 7 and in Ward 8, there has been a lot of information sharing, and that has to get to the young people. You know, that's what people are telling me. People, you know, are expressing their commitment to do their part in terms of educating young people, in terms of reaching disaffected residents who don't vote, who don't see any difference between the Democratic and the Republican Party. So there's a lot of that needs to happen, because there is an independent voting population in DC. So that element is still there. So Initiative 83 or not, the Democratic Party locally and nationally has some work to do in regards to like catching those disaffected voters. And one more point I want to make as it relates to I-83, and just to state the election in general, we're looking at, if I recall correctly, 52 years since the Gary Convention, what I like calling that fork in the road, you know, between nationalism and between further integration into the Democratic Party, you know, post John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, whatever else the case is. And right now, the Democratic Party is a sea of interest. So Black people are not the only people within the Democratic Party, whereas the Republican Party, it's a bit more homogenous. So the conservative issues, they can agree upon and coalesce around more easily. So Black people are at a crossroads themselves, and they have to understand, we have to understand that we are an island, you know, so we got to come, you know, and I'm not suggesting, you know, dumping the Democratic Party, people's party affiliations, that's their business. And of course, when it comes to politics and collaboration, it's a very nuanced issue, but there's a question that people have been asking, especially since the Obama era, like, to what degree is the Democratic Party representing who I am? Because I'm speaking as a millennial, you know, the Obama administration, to a lot of people, there were elements of it that represented what Bush had, or, you know, or what Biden had, you know, when you talk about internationally. So there are things that you have to talk about. And one last point I want to make in the interest of time, just to share the space. Again, the political landscape in DC, and let's talk about Ward 8, 2022, the redistricting, it brought in Navy Yard. And the election that's still being counted between Marquita Bryant and Alyssa De Souza in Navy Yard, that's still being counted. That is the microcosm of what's been happening in Ward 4 and portions of Ward 5 and in Ward 1 for like the last 15 years or so. So we have, you know, out-of-towners, you know, white people, whoever you want to call it, you know, they're white, Black, but out-of-towners with like way more means. They have education. They come into majority Black, majority Native Washingtonian neighborhoods, and they take on ANC positions. And then from there, they start changing the dynamics. And Ward 8 is going to have to worry about that, because not only is that seat up for grabs right now, but Marquita is going to take it. So before last week, it was up for grabs. But you also have a portion of ANC 8A, which to my knowledge has been taken over by somebody who is very polarizing himself. So there's a lot to consider as it comes to Ward 8, but that depends on, from what I've been told, if the Democratic Party can coalesce around more populist issues, issues that that people in the margins can identify with, that will electrify them to actually turn out and vote in primaries and in elections. That's the secret sauce that's missing: the voter education and how to encourage people to participate in general. I yield.
Well said, Sam. And I also want to note that you were covering that. Actually, your latest article covers what's happening over in Navy Yard with the count there. And so if you want to read his direct reporting, you should check out the Washington Informer, where he is talking exactly about this issue. Before we close out, I wanted to acknowledge Bob King. He is the self-appointed mayor of Fort Lincoln. He's also he's the mayor of our seniors in the District of Columbia, and also a mentor of mine. I certainly wanted to acknowledge him. Bob, your mic is open.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for allowing me this opportunity. When you say I'm the mayor, I told for around 1980, then Man Barrett said he had 3 mayors. He was the mayor of the city, he had the youth mayor, and Bob King was the mayor of Fort Lincoln. So not only I'm the mayor of Fort Lincoln, I'm the mayor for life of Fort Lincoln.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
I just want to quickly go over the interest of time, just talking about I-83.
Yeah.
If you look at I-83, and I was looking at Ward 8 for an example, since we're talking about Ward 8, this was as about 80% of the vote. Yeses was 17,975 for 72% of the vote. The no vote was 7,000. Let's be very clear as we continue our political autopsy, not just on the national election, but I-83. We had 2 PACs and didn't raise 1 dime. I think the highest amount was raised from one PAC was like $3,000. And we know that there were $1 million coming from outside. We know that even on election day, there were 3 states that voted against ranked choice voting. Sarah Palin, who lost to a Democrat, is repealing that in Alaska, and looks like the vote count might be going her way, except for D.C. We didn't even take a dull knife to this fight. We raised no money. We had no coalition. When they went out to circulate the petitions, they got 40,000 petitions, and 80% of those petitions came from Democrats. And of the nearly 300,000 plus Democrats, we didn't reach out. We had 30,000 Republicans who opposed ranked choice voting. The saving grace for ranked choice voting that we speak today, I'm trying to do a head count because prior to the election, I counted 8 potential council members who were denied funding. Because of the nearly 89 point support for this initiative, some of those council members might be changing their mind and might end up supporting Christine Henderson bill. The fate of this bill probably lies over in the 119th Congress. If you know, in the 117th Congress, there were 46 Democrats who joined the Republicans to deny ranked choice voting. It died over in the Senate because we had a Democratic senator who refused to bring the bill up. I don't believe that would be the case. I believe that the fate of I-83 is dead on arrival at the Congress. As we know, there's about $105 million from the Board of Election to do education. That should start somewhere in 2025. The legislature said if they fail to adequately educate the folks, they would ask the council for more time. I don't believe that even after we do the education, there'll be a question whether there'll be some dollars that the council will appropriate, what would be a massive amount of money to implement I-83. Quickly, let's go back to Kamala Harris and talk about what happens. We're talking about doing a political autopsy. As I said to Charles last week, 6 million Democrats did not vote this time around as they did last time. Never asked a question, let me have the answer. Why? Why? The reason is that Joe Biden, since 2021, never got more than a 40% approval rating. That's the first thing. Secondly, when Kamala Harris did not have any turbulence or getting in the plane, she had it on the ground. The voters in this country said 7% of the voters in this country, when she launched her 105-day campaign, said that the country was going in the wrong direction. 40% felt strongly about that. In spite of that campaign, all of those we ignored. Democrats simply ignored that in terms of what the people were thinking about the Democrats. Trump is the only president in 20 years that ever won the popular vote and electoral vote. 50 to 40, she lost by 1%. If she had had 1% of the vote in 3 states, she could have been the president. Remember, we
Right.
never had a black woman as governor in this country. We only had 3 black men, Wilder, Kilpatrick, and Moore. So you never had, so she's running to be the president of the United States. We never had a black woman governor. And so you understand she did, Trump won 78% on the economy, she got 20%. Where she won on the abortion issues, but in a lot of those rural states, people were choosing between food, gas, and rent. They said that the Supreme Court said let the states decide on abortion. They opt out of the abortion, gave it to Kamala Harris, and the final numbers I'll say, and I'll get off this phone here, in terms of black men, sex and race. Black men for Kamala Harris was 77%. Black men for Trump was 21%. Black women for Harris was 91%. 7% for black women went for Trump. Latino men, 43% went for Harris. 55% went for Trump. Latino women, 60% went for Harris. 38% went for Trump, and all others was 48 to 46. The thing we got to pray about is our black women who always suffered. They're going to suffer at the corporate level. They've been suffering since slavery. And to show you, it wasn't just sexism, racism. There's an article that came out on November the 10th. I'll read it to you. Black people in several states received text messages threatening to put them back, threatening with slavery. So I'm saying in addition to racism in the 240 years of this country, sexism, the economy, and then we had a president who had the lowest numbers of any of his predecessors, and we had an outstanding woman, attorney general, vice president, uniquely qualified. And what did they do? They said she was stupid, mentally ill, and the fastest t-shirts were selling for her that she was a hoe. And that's an offense to all black women. Because you know, when Hillary Clinton ran, she won the popular vote, they called her a bitch. But with Kamala Harris, no, mentally ill, stupid, and a hoe. Offense to all black women who've been suffering from this at the hands of white men ever since slavery is in this country. So that's the political autopsy. Yeah. So what it was, Democrats Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. 6 million people, Democrats did not vote. And because the Democrats did not deal with the economy, Joe Biden, who I love to death, and met him, had the lowest numbers of his predecessors in 2021, could not rise above 40%, and 70% of this country saying we're going in the wrong direction. But Trump, make America great again? Yes. What does that mean? Make it great again with our black and brown people. Yes, do we need coalitions, Mr. Chairman? I applaud you and salute you. One of the strongest organizations come out of Ward 8, and I'm happy to be an honorary member of the Ward 8 Dems. We got 5 different coalitions. Every day there's a new coalition coming out of D.C., defend D.C. We need to figure out who are these coalitions. Because in spite of our individual goals, we have the final analysis, we have the same common objectives to defend this city. And we house divided itself with all these coalitions spread it all over the place. I urge you, I'll stand with you. Let's find out who these coalitions are, bring these people together and talk about all of our individual goals, which translate into what is our common objective. Democrats, we gave this election to Trump. 6 million of you did not vote.
Bob, as always, thank you. Thank you so much for your insights and for your honesty and for your rawness. That's why I wanted to bring you on, at least so that we can hear you, even though we couldn't see you. But I do appreciate what you're saying there. And I should also mention that those who were listening to you in the chat, they're all singing your praises. They're all saying amen. So you're definitely on target with that, Bob, and I thank you for that, especially around I-83 and your work around that as well. Thank you, Bob King. So as we close out, Dr. Perry, go right ahead and with your follow-up, and then so your final thoughts.
Well, we need to honor these legends like Bob King. So, we need to do more of this. Those community voices that know more than any of us, who claim to study this stuff could ever know, really are the folks who run politics in local communities. I did want to add a couple academic points to the analysis of some of the numbers.
If we could do it very quickly, because I want to be mindful of your time. And also the time of everyone else.
Who is 2 seconds. Yeah. It's just that the autopsies that we have seen highlighted by race, class, or gender are exactly as Bob King talked about. I just want to highlight that one of the challenges that we had in this election was one, again, Harris only had 107 days to build a campaign. That's never happened in modern American political history. And so it is difficult to get to people in the hinterlands of America. You only have 107 days. But then secondly, is that if you actually look at exit polls, and exit polls are actually a little bit more reliable than pre-election polls. Exit polls tell you why folks voted and what was on their mind. Notice that none of them have talked about eggs or the economy or international affairs or what have you. They have mostly talked about what some of the points that Bob King talked about that are racially and genderly related. In Black male communities, we have to do a better job. There's a high level of sexism. There's no way that Trump should have got 21% of the Black male vote. That's the only group that Trump has increased in and gotten better with over time is Black men. Something's wrong there. I've cussed out a lot of Black men at barbershops here in the DMV area, and I have no apologies about it. Because it's one thing to not know, it's another thing to then be informed and then still to cling to your heels of ignorance. And so I hope we learn from this campaign, this lesson that yes, you got to be, twice as good and all the things that we've been told as Black folks, most of us on this call. And so, but also it was somewhat not surprising that Kamala Harris lost. But let's not do a complete autopsy that says that we got to start all over because she barely lost. And this coloration of states of red and blue and this and that, it really came down to a couple 100,000 votes out of about 170 million cast. And so that's really doable and gettable. And we just got to work between now and 2026, y'all, here on the ground locally to make sure that we get also out the vote. We have 55% of folks who turned out in DC. That's too low, y'all. We should be in the 70s. Black folks in the 60s and 70s, when we got the right to vote in 68, we were at 70 something percentile of our eligibility. And if we aren't voting, whether you're voting Democrat or something else, but we aren't voting at all, like it's a real concern. And so, and these numbers will therefore continue. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be in this conversation. I'll be glad to add my information in the chat. Be glad to continue this dialogue about statehood and what can happen in this conservative era. But we should be concerned about what's happening with Trump. I would, even if we have some conservative Democrats in the line, many of my friends fall in that camp as well. We should not just wait and see what Trump's going to do. Like I heard John Fetterman, Pennsylvania senator, say that. Let's just wait. Let's just see. Let's not be too dramatic. Well, we should be a little bit more dramatic, as Sam was talking about earlier. We have some of us know and remember what happened last time, and so we're a little bit more cautious about what we can expect this time because of that experience, and so we should just prepare accordingly.
And how can people reach you, Dr. Perry?
My email, Ravi.Perry, RAVI.PERRY @howard.edu. I'm also newly elected ANC 7E06, so I'll see y'all if you ever come over to Ward 7 side, the somewhat better side of east of the river. No offense, but we had that Ron Bronson we talked about.
That's highly offensive. That's actually highly offensive.
Did you just throw some shade?
That's actually highly offensive, Dr. Perry, newly elected ANC commissioner.
Oh, I had to represent my community. Come on, y'all. No, but
come on, you could have done it better than that. I would never have said Ward 8, although we do say the Great Ward 8.
The Great Ward 8. The Great Ward 8.
But people know it's true.
Man. Thank y'all very much. Really an honor. Thank you.
No, Dr. Perry, you always bring enlightenment and insights, and I think just you drill down in areas that we knew we needed to do. And so, thank you for being here and being a part of this conversation. Twice now, you were here, I think, 2 years ago when we had a similar autopsy about the election results, and here we are back again. And so, I thank you, of course, for your time. I know you're very, very busy, and HU. And then, of course, Sam, I want to give you an opportunity to provide some final thoughts here and then your contact information as well.
No doubt. You can reach me at scollins@washingtoninformer.com or Twitter, Instagram, if you feel the need to do so that way. I'm really accessible. But as far as final thoughts, I mean, quite frankly, I am open, speaking as a reporter now, I have been, but I'm just putting out a notice there, as far as any voter education efforts that come up, anything that I can shadow or, ask more questions about, by all means, please let me know. I'm speaking to the Ward 8 Democrats leadership. Uh, the next 2 or 4 years, again, and I think somebody spoke to this in the chat, I'm going to be looking at locally what's happening. Of course, there are implications for what happened federally, but locally, speaking to my point earlier in the discussion, there's a spectrum of political ideologies and viewpoints within the Democratic Party in DC. And reconciling that is going to answer the question of what happened with Initiative 83. Because once again, people are disaffected. They see anti-Black policy, anti-working class policy coming out of Democratic leadership locally. So there's going to need to be some reconciliation. And I'm speaking based on what I've gathered, speaking with residents and also in the Wilson building. Many thanks. Thank you. On mute.
Thank you. That's Sam P.K. Collins. He's a reporter for the Washington Informer. He covers Ward 7, Ward 8, and DC politics and the district really in general. And thank you for being here and really sharing your insights. And then you heard from previously Dr. Ravi Perry. He's a professor of political science at Howard University and also the vice chair at DC Vote. So thank you both. Thank you both. And of course, to Bob King and to our Vice President, Sheila Bunn, and to all of you for being here and being a part of our discussion today. We like to always provide an opportunity if there's any major announcements that people should know about, that this is an opportunity to do that now before we officially adjourn. So if there's anything in the chat, if you want to raise your hand, we'll certainly try to recognize you in our remaining moments. Certainly want to thank you all who have stuck with us for the past 11 minutes as we're over time. But certainly want to just thank all of you for being here. And then there is an announcement here from ANC 8A Chair Jamila White. They are hiring a communications consultant. And so if you are interested, please apply into that. I think they need help around newsletters and communications to the greater ANC 8A community. You can send an email to 8a@anc.dc.gov. Send your resume, send your reel of all the things that you can do for 8A. And so Sheila Bunn, I want to recognize you.
Yes, just in addition to your quest to have people join the Ward 8 Dems, I just want to say to those that are participating, it might be a thankless job sometimes, but we need folk to volunteer to be advisory neighborhood commissioners. And looking at the results from Election Day, there are several of our ANCs who only have 2 ANC commissioners elected to that commission. I live in 8D and we only have 2 commissioners. So just want to encourage folk. It's hard work, but it is good work. And if you are so inclined, please run. Whatever there's going to be a special election, whatever, please get involved. We need more ANC commissioners. That is the first line of defense on a lot of community issues. So please, 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 encouraging everyone to take a look and see if your ANC is filled. If not, think about running for it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome for that. And as I think both of us have been ANC commissioners, we certainly understand why it's so important to fill these positions. I think I call it at least, it's the closest level of government to the people. I call them hyper local elected officials. And so it can be thankless, but it can also be very rewarding as well. So as Sheila said, take a look at the Board of Elections website, look at the results there. I mean, I think there are write-ins for all of those empty seats, but if they, if no one written in a name, then I think at that point, there will certainly be a special election that will be held right there in your ANC for those open seats. And continue to check out the Board of Elections website too. They will be updating and reporting out the results, especially for those write-in positions. All right, well, I don't see anyone else who has raised a hand about anything that we have coming up, or that they have coming up. So I just want to just close out with the following information here. Once again, we just want to let you know that if you are interested in sowing a seed here at the Ward 8 Democrats, we will certainly give you an on-ramp to do that. You can donate at the Ward 8 to the Ward 8 Democrats by scanning that QR code right there. It'll take you straight to our donation page where you can make a one-time donation or a reoccurring donation. We ask you to do that with that QR code. You can also go to our website at ward8dems.com. And at the top of the page, you click on donate, take you to the same place on our Act Blue website. If you are an active Act Blue participant, it will just take you a couple of seconds to donate. If it's your first time, it's going to take you a couple of minutes just to get your information in there. At that point, you're in there and you should be good with future donations. And again, you could make a one-time donation, 1, 2, 5, 8. $8 would be good too. 10, 25, 100, 500. Or you could become a reoccurring donor, which several of our several people are, and we of course thank them for their reoccurring support of the Ward 8 Democrats in the financial way. And then be sure to join the DC Young Democrats on Wednesday, November 20th. They're going to be at the Martin Luther King Jr. Library on the 4th floor, and it's from 6 to 8. We are partnering with our other friends there. You see their logos there. And you even see Marcus Batchelor will be there. Marcus Batchelor, of course, is a member of the Ward 8 Democrats executive team. He'll be a speaker there. And so we invite you to come and be a part of that social hour and panel discussion. It's going to be at MLK Library on Wednesday, November 20th from 6 to 8. If you haven't been down there, it's a great excuse for you to get downtown and check out the library. And then finally, if you're interested in joining the DC Democratic Party, we do have some add-on member elections coming up in January. Screenshot this, go to that website right there. Just go to the DC Democratic Party's website where you can find out how you can apply. The deadline, I should tell you, is fast approaching. Tuesday, November 19th is the deadline, and it's by 5 o'clock. So if you're interested in this, go there now, check it out, and apply. Well, again, we want to thank Dr. Ravi Perry for being here. We want to thank Sam P.K. Collins for being here. They've given you their contact information. You know exactly how to reach them. Thanks for waving goodbye to us. And congratulations to you again, Dr. Perry, on becoming an ANC commissioner-elect. Join us. Be sure to come back and join us in December. Sorry, trying to get my slides together here. So many moving pieces. Come back and join us in December. Come on, slide, share. There we go. Join us in December where we will have our annual Kwanzaa holiday celebration. We haven't nailed down the date yet, so just stay tuned to us here. Follow us on our socials and on our website. We will put the information up there, but it's always a good time. You see people in that picture right there having a good time at our Ward 8 Kwanzaa celebration where we look at traditions and heritage, and we come together around food and music and just being neighbors. And so make sure you stay tuned for that. Last year it was at Sycamore and Oak. We're looking to have it back there again this year if we can agree on a date. So come out and be a part of our Ward 8 Kwanzaa celebration. I'm sharing that. And as we close, I want to thank Charles Wilson, the chair of the DC Democratic Party, who was with us earlier. Go back and watch this again if you missed any of it. You can check out our Facebook page, check out our YouTube channel. And then, of course, we will post this on our website and in our future newsletters. So if there's nothing further, listen, folks, I know the election was tough, but we will get through this. I have faith the size of a mustard seed that we will get through it. As again, to quote the great Frederick Douglass, without struggle, there is no progress. And so we know struggle. And so we're going to struggle through this and we're going to make progress. I believe it. But we should not be Pollyannish about this. It's going to be tough, but we are tougher. And so let's continue this fight. Let's continue to come together and fight for the things and advocate for the things that we care about, the values that we care about, DC values and priorities. And we will see you in December in person at our Kwanzaa celebration. Listen, be well, be safe, talk to somebody if you're still having anxiety around this election. May God bless us all, and we will see you on the other side. Thank you.